So my name is Diane Patterson, and I am a parent caregiver of a teen with EDS who's been indicated to have hypermobile, but another rare subtype as well. I'm not going to share much more about my personal journey because today's talk is on self-advocacy and representing the patient population that comes to us at the ILC looking for support. It's really about being a neutral resource of what and how you can further what you need from the healthcare system as it currently exists in Ontario and Canada. So we're going to spend some time on that. I'm going to make you aware that there is a handout in your folder on various healthcare advocacy strategies. Thank you. Like too close, too far. Okay. You just don't love the mic, right? So in doing that, I may skip over some slides today in the interest of time. I know it's the end of a very long day for people who are really struggling just to be mindfully present in this moment because of the amount of pain and issues that we and many are all dealing with. So it is a holistic presentation, and then I'm also going to reflect on what it takes to be aware, self-aware, and self-care enough to actually effectively provide advocacy for yourself. Is that whistling out there too? Do we know why? No? Okay. Sorry. Better? Okay. All right, so did the slide there change? And I'm still whistling away, aren't I? Okay. Does that help? Okay. So in saying that, as you can see, there's a good definition of what I believe self-advocacy is really about, occurring in people who are speaking out on behalf of their own improvement of quality of life, hoping to affect personal change, and to hopefully, maybe, correct some inequalities. I'm apologizing for my whistling. I want to start by putting some kind of understanding for my talk today. And by saying that, what I mean is that I'm here as a resource, not an expert. Okay, so I'm a parent who's had to use many advocacy tools that are presently available within the country, but it doesn't make me an expert. I am not here to put any personal pressure or expectation on any one of you. So please do not take this as a message of personal burden. That this is not something you need to take away and feel like, oh, somebody expects this of me, that I need to somehow fit this into my day and my time and my energy. That is not what today's talk is about. So I'm also not going to get into my child's journey or our personal experiences because it's not relevant to your personal experience. What I'm sharing are the facts about what's available to you. So as you can see there, I'm going to ask that you refrain from your personal story when the question and answer period comes, because I'm not here to solve those personal journeys, but rather give you the tools for self-advocacy. You can always connect with me at the end on a one-on-one approach if you'd like, but know that that's out there as a possibility. And also I'm going to ask that we respect confidentiality. It is no secret that healthcare has been a struggle for EDS patients within the province and the country, but we are not here to further any negativity about doctors, your experience, or your personal experience within an institution or hospital. We're here to work towards change, communication, and make things better. Okay. So 2 principles exist in personal advocacy. Obviously, if we could use the existing systems, that's going to be our best chance for actual change. That's not easily done, and most people do not have the benefit of having some formal education around personal advocacy or what exists. I was fortunate enough to have some background in this before my child came to me, and this became our journey. And there are no quick fixes. So, you know, for those of us on Facebook or anyone who's kind of having a vent about today's appointment, fair, it's an emotional outlet, but at the same time, it's not going to make the next appointment better. So we need to think about how we're going to influence better care in the province and in the country. So these are just my personal opinions. These are my biased personal opinions of where there are some gaps and how things are kind of going by the wayside. These are generalized statements. They're not backed with any research or data. This is just my impressions of how things are not working so smoothly in the current system. That right now, many people are having poor interactions with healthcare professionals that are not really of malice intent, but rather a lack of knowledge, a lot of siloed system of healthcare, right? You will see how many different specialists who will all be having one perspective of a multi-system disease. There's little to no effective coordination of care and communication. So very few people actually have a comprehensive care plan. And actually, the few that have shared that, I'm very curious to hear more about, or where that originates from, or how much they had to create for themselves. So most of you are burdened with basically being the complex care coordinator of your own care. I think everyone would mostly agree with that statement. So, I mean, you do become an expert in this condition. At the same time, it's exhausting. So I would like for all of us to try to think about more systemic ways to influence change so that that burden could be lifted somewhat. So social media obviously can be a very powerful tool for system change. It can offer opportunities for people to offer opinions on service delivery, healthcare priorities, and complex symptomology. And you saw that with the ILC survey that just recently was out and the types of questions that were put forward. So that data will be very important going forward, and hence why those systems are so important for all of us to utilize, use the patient voice, keep sharing that information, and make sure that the grapevine network that is very close among you all continues to exist. All right, so my personal goals when I'm thinking about advocacy overall is to always seek communication, resolution, and ultimately change if that's what I feel is needed to hopefully affect a better outcome for my daughter in her care. So right now, I see a lot of social media groups being used simply to vent, to talk about what their experiences are. And that's still a very healthy place. It can be a safe place, but it's not going to provide the same outcomes if we were using more formalized systems for advocacy. Because right now, the most people using those forms are not actually being tracked with the amount of struggles and gaps that are out there. So if they were being tracked in formal systems with statistics that were being gathered across the province and the country in various departments, that's going to add up and reflect what's out there and what's not out there. So ideally, in some magical way, I would love to see the patient voice be more coordinated. That if ultimately we all left from here and shared this message or any of the information you received from the conference today and that you share with every other person struggling with this disease, that we start to create a collective voice, that will help influence decision makers. And that's what it's going to take. So when we are frustrated and disappointed and overwhelmed and bankrupt from care, we need to think about how we're going to create care here. So in your package, you will see that there are a number of complaint processes that are listed under navigation of personal advocacy. I'm not going to go through each and every one of them. There was a fair amount of time put into creating this handout so that it is user-friendly, that it's simplistic, and it's in layman's terms. We'll just talk on a couple of that. I want to leave more time for discussion, questions, because it is a long day and people need to get going. But the most common thing out there that's currently present is the patient experience, sometimes known as the patient relations department. This is otherwise or historically called the complaint department, but can also be the complement department. So it can work both ways. If you've had positive interactions with healthcare, you've had something successful happen, it would be equally as important to maximize that story and bring it forward, because people love to hear good feedback, and then they're more likely to see more of that happen right? So if you propose an idea, they embrace it, or one person does, something successful comes of it, it is very important to share a good news story, even if there's been 10 bad news stories before that in the same hospital. So we have had this experience, and one of the interventions my daughter received was substantially successful, and I made a point to send an email to the same parties that I had advocated to say, here's the outcome. This is how much our quality of life for her, for our family, for our financial situation changed because of what happened. I think it's important for people to see there is success. If people are concerned, both patient and medical-wise, that there's no change, that you're only under a chronic disease label, which suggests you're going to stay the same or get worse. If people suggest that or perpetuate that view, there will be little hope to influence a different approach. If they know there can be successes and things that work, then there'll be much greater buy-in in trying to facilitate that and to make that happen for other patients. So I think it's really important to stress that you find something that works, or you find a physician, or you find a care plan strategy that is comprehensive in some way, in some place. Share that, because others could be benefiting from it.
Can I add a point here?
Yes, please.
So for those of you that have home and community care from the LHIN, they're going across the province to do a coordinated care plan that will become not only accessible to home and community care, but will also become accessible to other medical providers that are on your approved list. So with it, you don't have to share your care plan from your respirologist and urologist, your orthopedic surgeon. It will hopefully all be housed in that one suppository. So they're working on that, and it should be working in the next 6 months. So talk to your case managers.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great example. Thank you, Tammy. So just some basic principles that apply for a patient experience department would be example of always keep a file of all communications, whether issues were resolved or unresolved. And when I say a file, whether that's an electronic file or whether you sent a letter or whatever, a paper trail is really important when filing any concerns with anything. Always request a response date, right? So could you please get back to me within a week, 2 weeks, whatever you feel is reasonable for what you've brought forward. And probably most importantly, in language that you might not know if you've never been in any kind of social services, HR, or business, would mean that you need to ask for the escalation path. This is a term for how do I move a concern or a complaint up the ranks? Where does this go? What is the official path? If you do not basically play ball by the rules of the game, it will be dismissed. It will be within the hidden policies and procedures that you didn't receive when you set foot in a hospital, but they're there. They're absolutely there. So you need to ask, what is the escalation path? Like who is next and where I would bring this once I've asked for a response, and maybe I don't get one in a week or two. Who's next? Is it a VP? Is it a manager? Is it the CEO? Right? And where does that end? Okay, so again, if you're not getting an ideal outcome or resolution, you do always have that right to continue up the escalation path. So I'm going to, in the interest of time and questions, I want to move to chronic illness is obviously a journey. And we've seen the signs from our guests from the US, as well of like not a straight path journey, right? So it's not going to be A plus B equals C. No, nothing like this. So you do have a ton of specialty involvement. You're probably overrepresented. We're called the high consumers of healthcare is what I'm hearing, right? So I know my daughter is a fair representation of this and multitudes of specialists that had I not walked this journey, I did not know you could have this much care but not effectively affect her health care. I honestly I would not have believed it had I not walked this journey myself. So it's important to know no one really owns EDS. We know this. There is no specialist saying, yep, send them my way. It's not happening, right? Clearly, or we all wouldn't be sitting here. So You need to just keep that in mind, that it is normal to feel like no one gets this illness, that no one knows what you're living, no one understands it. Many people don't believe it, and you've probably heard more times than is healthy ever that this is in your head. This is absolutely not the case. It's a really devaluing statement, but unfortunately it's common. So I just want to really validate that as not the facts, but it's important to acknowledge how much a chronic illness of this capacity causes grief and loss. These are legitimate grieving incidents, episodes that is happening both to your physical health and your mental health and your spiritual health and all the capacities and losses that come with that of jobs and education and travel and just having a body you can trust and needing a healthcare provider you could trust. These are all losses, and they need to be acknowledged as such. If you had lost the closest people in your life and were attending those funerals, no one would be asking, why are you anxious or depressed? No one would be asking this, because these are normal, healthy responses for what is happening. So on that note, I just wanted to touch briefly on stages of grief, because you do not have to lose a person in your life to experience stages of grief. They are very real and they happen, and every person can have them. There's no right or wrong time of what stage you're in. There's no right or wrong direction, and they happen in different levels of intensity for each and every person, and they will happen to every person who loves someone with EDS. It will be an ongoing grieving process. It is not going to be a one time. It's not just the time you heard you have this disease. So knowing that that's going to be ongoing, you really need to look at self-awareness and self-care, right? So for those of you who have never heard the term resiliency, this is about your ability to bounce back. What skills and capacities and emotional strength and awareness do you bring to the game to continue to get up every morning and keep doing it, right? So you need to think about, how much emotional intelligence do I have to manage all that's on my plate? Because there's an awful lot on your plate. So I want to validate that, because I think sometimes I see patients that are not fully embracing what they can have, which is, let's work at my emotional awareness, because that's what I'm going to need to get to the end game. This is a difficult disease for everyone. So I think it's really important to think about and maybe educate myself a bit more on, what is my emotional intelligence? What does that even mean to be emotionally aware? How am I aware of how this is affecting me, everyone around me, and how I interact with the healthcare system? So in saying that, I want to really reflect on things that have been very powerful for myself. And one of the very first things that was incredibly powerful for myself was connecting in a peer support group at Sandy's. Probably the first year the ILC actually ran. My daughter had a diagnosis that I was completely baffled by. Simply Googled, and this ILC came up. So I attended. And since then, I've come to be very aware how much those social connections are really important, right? Because being able to be with your tribe, for people who understand what your journey is essential. It's absolutely essential. And keeping some humor, right? So peer connection is very important, because it's not happening in a hospital lobby. It's not only on social media and Facebook. It's really important. These conferences are invaluable, and that's why we see people come from across Canada, the once a year it happens, because they know they need to have this. Once a year, they need to go there and talk to people who are in their shoes. They can sit at the same table and not explain why they're uncomfortable. So, in my opinion, peer support is priceless. It's going to be part of the resiliency. It's going to be part of the self-awareness. It's going to be part of self-care that comes with being able to effectively do self-advocacy. In the interest of time, I'm going to offer, if anyone has any questions, maybe reference that handout specifically. But again, recognizing I can't answer specifics on your individual situation, but rather if you have anything general that others can learn from, or something about these system processes that you'd like to know a bit more about, I can do my best to answer.